Welcome to Interviews with Innocence, a podcast about spirituality, consciousness, and exploring the wisdom our children bring into this world. I believe that our very young children are our greatest teachers. After all, they're the masters of living in the present moment, bubbling in unconditional love, enjoying the messiness of life, and curious about the universe in all its dimensions. The pure essence that young children exhibit lives within all of us. My hope is that these interviews will help us discover, embrace, and connect with the sacred core of childhood that resides within each of our hearts. I am your host, Marla Hughes. I am so excited about the plant medicine series that is coming up over the next few weeks. Today, we will begin with Dr. Joe Tafur, who received his medical training at University of California, San Diego. When we recorded this interview, Dr. Tafur was in Colombia, so I apologize for little blips in the conversation or when it speeds up or when we talk over one another. We tried our best with the iffy internet. So here we go. Today, I am delighted to have Dr. Joe Tafur on the show. Dr. Tafur has been an integrative medicine activist throughout his medical career, while in medical school at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and during his Family Medicine Residency at the University of California, Los Angeles. Dr. Tafur has observed that modern medicine struggles with certain mental and psychosomatic health problems because it fails to address the emotional and spiritual dimensions of these illnesses. Under the guidance of master shamans, Dr. Tafur has learned about the importance of acknowledging the emotional body and its role in modern disease. In Peru, Dr. Tafur learned how ayahuasca and shamanism could be used to heal the emotional body. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, Joe.
Welcome to me.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show.
You're very welcome. And for the listeners, Joe is in Colombia. So if the audio goes off a little bit, he's down there having a retreat. And before we start, I want to just tell the listeners about your new book. And how long has it been out now? Has it been out for a while?
It came out in March of 2017.
Okay. Called Fellowship of the River. And it is, I have to tell you, I could not put the book down. Your journey, the way it was written, it was read like a novel, but it's true. Everything's true. And so I just want to thank you for writing that book. And I really encourage all my listeners to run out and get it, because I usually don't do this, but it is a really great book.
Thank you very, very much.
So let's just jump right in. Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about the beginning of your spiritual journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the beginning of my spiritual journey is more from my family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that the spiritual healing journey with plant medicine and all that, you know, that's further down the road. But I you know, my family's from Colombia. That's why I'm here visiting the extended family. And here, I think it's just a more, in general, mystical culture. You know, that my family's Catholic, but their form of Catholicism down here is a lot more mystical. You know, They're growing up hearing about miracles and all kinds of things happening, and there's always something kind of supernatural happening, you know, around, or you hear about it, and so it's really connection to spirit is considered a very real thing, I think, here and among a lot of families, and so that it's not such a leap. You know, some of the things that I'm down here to like spread the book in Spanish, you know,
right.
That's what I'm doing. That's part of what I'm doing here, and it's funny how there's a lot of it that they already get.
They're familiar with it. Yes,
they're familiar. There's other parts, of course, that we're a lot further along with, on the science side and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the heartfelt part is strong. So I'd say my spiritual journey began with my family, you know, my parents, and growing up, I grew up going to church, Catholic church, and all of that stuff. And so it wasn't just talk and blah, blah, blah. It was actual, like, you know, connecting to the universe.
Right. And then going on to medical
Well, then I went
school.
to medical
Yes.
school. Then that was the big challenge. That's what really broke that. I was doing pretty well, feeling very connected to everything, myself, spiritually, and in nature and community and all those things that I think are so important for people to maintain their kind of spiritual well-being. And then I went to medical school, and which was a huge opportunity. I'm very grateful to be a doctor and all of that. But, it was very difficult, hard. I think maybe especially hard on my sensibility, being kind of more spiritually oriented person. And just not only, I mean, there's a difficulty and a trauma of the training, going through and dealing with, you're in the healthcare field, and,
Yes.
dealing with some very tragic, difficult things, and then having to deal with it in kind of a cold-blooded fashion because of the volume and, whatever, the rest of it, and some of the business side of it. But in the training was really when I had a hard time, and it was just kind of the mentality. Your time is so dominated, and your mental space is so dominated by all of that, that something inside you starts to kind of give, something's kind of wants out.
Right.
And so, in my case, I became depressed, and I guess it's not so uncommon in that environment, but other people perhaps had been through worse, and they were able to go through that without such trouble. But for me, it was difficult. So I had a hard time, and I felt depressed. I felt kind of trapped in my mind. And my father was a psychiatrist, and I went to go talk to him, and he suggested, "Oh, why don't you try some antidepressants, to get through it?" And I tried that, and that was helpful to me. And I talk about that in my book, how I didn't, I was not a very, I was not a psychonautic person. I tried a few
Right.
things, smoked some marijuana, but I wasn't like drug pursuing type of person. And so I tried the antidepressants, but at the same time, I was around a friend of mine who was starting to get involved in psychedelic research, because that was starting to get going. It was like 1999, 2000. The DMT research had started again at the University of New Mexico, and then there was opportunities in Europe, in Switzerland, and so I started learning about that, and I was realizing, wow, there's all this crossover in the biochemistry between the serotonin, reuptake inhibitors, the Prozacs, and the serotonin circuitry that the psychedelics was working on, and just learning more and more about it. And the early psychedelic research, clinical research, was important in identifying the serotonin neurotransmitter system. Like, we didn't even know, they didn't even know how the brain worked before, that there were neurotransmitters. I think they were just focused on the electricity involved for a while there, or whatever they thought. And then to find out there's these serotonin circuit and this other neurotransmitter circuits, LSD was a huge part of them discovering that. And so just learning about all the crossover and the biochemistry, it just made me kind of more comfortable and curious about psychedelics. And I'm from Arizona, and I wanted to try something more natural. And a friend of mine, he was very, let's go, let's go try peyote. There's a place you can go do peyote.
Was this
And so I
Kayvon?
went to, no, this is before that. This is my
Oh,
friend. I call him,
okay.
in the book, I call him Barack. Kayvon has done peyote with me there. I don't know if he wants me to tell everybody. Probably he doesn't care. But the other friend is he's named Barack in the book, and I'll let him speak for himself. But he's good friends with Kayvon. And we went to go that was my first experience, was with peyote. And I went to go through a ceremonial experience of peyote at the Peyote Way Church of God in Arizona. And it's open there to outsiders. You don't have to be Native American, and they are involved in cultivating their own peyote and the sustainability of peyote. And I had an incredible experience there. I had a very, very kind of healing, extremely, it's all night, and it has its ups and downs, but I just felt reconnected immediately to myself. My mind quieted down, and just felt connected to spirit and nature and all that stuff. And it just was a huge transition and a huge boost for me.
Wow.
To get through medical school. And I was just kind of shocked that we hadn't heard about this or known about this as doctors,
Yes.
that something like this was out there. And so I went back there a few more times, as I continued my training, and then the training got better and got more active. It was more about hands-on, doing things for people instead of just sitting there, whatever, taking it from some people I didn't, respect too much, or what,
Right.
this indoctrination part of it. It was more about us and being able-bodied and helping people. And so I enjoyed that part of medicine. And I went on with that. And I had other spiritual influence. Like I said, I still have my family, strong spiritual influence. And then I had explored a little bit of all kinds of stuff in California, with, whether it was Zen meditation or even Afro-Cuban Santeria or other things, Native American stuff. I was going to sweat lodge sometimes through that process. And so all of that really helped me. And then eventually when I finished my residency in 2006 from Family Medicine at UCLA, I, with Kayvon, who had been through, college with me at UCLA and then medical school, and then we ended up doing residency together. And so we've been through the whole thing. And I had been learning about ayahuasca because of what peyote had done for me. I was very curious about ayahuasca, seeing that I had heard about. My family's from Colombia. Here we have it. It's called yahe. They call it in Colombia. And the Amazon, my best friend, yahe.
Yahe.
So my grandfather's best friend was a guy that did a lot of research in the Amazon botany and medical botany. So I knew about the yahe, and I knew, wow, I was like, well, if this is what, peyote is like, well, I wonder what that's like.
Right.
And so I had this kind of growing curiosity. And the Kayvon had said, well, he wanted to complete this loop in South America as part of like the graduation of the whole thing. And so then I wanted to do ayahuasca, and he had done it before. So he's like, well, if you come with me to Iquitos, I'll do ayahuasca with you, and then come with me and we'll go down the river, to the beach. We'll go down the Amazon River. And so he called it the Fellowship of the River.
Yes.
Because it was, instead of other kinds of, subspecialty in medicine, after residency is called fellowship, cardiology fellowship after internal medicine, or sports fellowship after family medicine. And so he made that up, Fellowship of the River. Let's go down there. And that became the play on words, because we went down there and we did ayahuasca and a Scripps Center, and I had a very big experience. And then that turned into an actual long journey, which was a subsequent subspecialty for me in traditional Amazonian plant medicine that, is still going on today. Yes. It went on for years and was very intense, and, as intense as any residency that, I went to UCLA. I mean, I worked in the cardiology ICU and cardiac ICU.
That's
it was intense.
Yes.
So I'm just saying this was intense down there in the jungle, running an ayahuasca healing center for years in Peru.
So some of our listeners really have not heard of ayahuasca before. So can you talk a little bit about what it is? And then I'd love to talk about what exactly happens in a ceremony, and how the shamans are an essential part, as is song.
Right. So there's ayahuasca is a tea, right? They call it like Pan-Amazonian. So there's many, it's all over the Amazon, from the mouth to Peru, to the headwaters, and Ecuador and Colombia, and all over Brazil, and I think even into Venezuela, Bolivia. And so there's a lot of different tribes and cultures using ayahuasca. So there's many different ways to use it. Just to say, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. The basic tea that most of the cultures use a form of is made from, in Peru, they use those words, ayahuasca is a Peruvian term, Quechua language. So ayahuasca is the vine, and then you mix that vine with another plant. In this case, Peruvian, and there's a lot of tribes use chacruna as well. You mix those two things in a pot and boil them for a long time and refine that down, and you get a tea. And so that tea is called ayahuasca, named for the vine. And it's considered a sacred medicine by the tribes, and is used traditionally for healing, and in particular for soul healing. First with indigenous tribes, but now there's syncretic churches in Brazil that use it, and other kinds of communities that use it as well. And so that's what ayahuasca is, basically.
And I know ayahuasca, though, it's not just the tea. The ceremony is such an important part of the healing process. And
Right.
I know I've heard you talk a lot about what the shamans do during the ceremony, and also, once again, the importance of, I think you call it Ecos, the song?
The Icaros.
Icarus, okay.
Icaros.
Yes. And so can you tell
Yeah,
us just a little bit about
so
that?
right. So then within the different traditions, like there's all different ways to go about it and do it. And so the format that we were a part of, which is a kind of a traditional Shipibo format, was that the ayahuasca ceremonies were happening within the context of a larger treatment. So there's this traditional Amazonian plant medicine. So ayahuasca is one of the, plant medicines used amidst many plants used in the Amazon. And some of them are for like more pharmacologic purposes, for their physical properties. And many of them are used for their spiritual properties, including the ayahuasca. So there's many plants. And so when people come down to a place like Niue Rao, which is the name of the center that I helped to found, and then now is owned exclusively by the shaman himself, Ricardo Amaringo, you go and you do a plant diet. So you're getting treated within the context of this Shipibo plant diet, which means you're going to go into retreat for, let's say, a minimum of 10 days. And you're going to be given assigned a master plant during that diet, which you're going to be on this very restrictive diet. No salt, no sugar, no dairy, no red meat, no pork, no sex, no alcohol, no greasy food, no spicy food. So a very restrictive diet, and kind of isolated, or at least taken out into the forest in a natural retreat. And then you start that with a vomitive. You drink something to make you throw up, just to even start the whole process. Talking to the shamans, why are you there? How can we help you? And then they're going to assign you a master plant, which is going to be a plant that is specifically prescribed to you to try to help you with your specific issues.
Interesting.
There may be other plants. There may be other treatments involved. There may be, for example, sometimes there's plant baths. Sometimes there's like little steam baths with plants. Sometimes there's topical poultices that might be used. And then there's other plants that can be taken. So the idea is there's this much larger field of plant medicine that they feel is actually more important, that you diet and are treated with the plants.
Right.
So then you come to ceremony. So then ayahuasca ceremony is held. And so the ceremony is held in a very sacred way. And so, yes, you're offered ayahuasca. You don't have to drink ayahuasca to participate in the ceremony. So the important part is that you receive healing song, the Icaro. Right. So the Icaro is considered to be a form of energy healing, spiritual healing. So the shaman drinks ayahuasca to help them open their connection to the plants and to their visions. They may not drink very much after they're very well practiced and trained, but they're still working with it to help them kind of open their third eye vision, so to speak,
Right.
to help them see into the spiritual realm and guide from there, and to draw energy from their plant teachers with song to guide the process, to help open and protect everyone going through these kind of metaphysical realms are kind of opened up, or people have that experience, and so that's guided by the shamans to protect them, to help them, and then to help clean and clear them.
And I've heard you say that also one reason the shamans participate is it helps them on the one-to-one, the participant, it helps them open up to know what's really important for them, what they need.
Sure.
Healing.
Yes. So then that's a huge part of it. So it's also considered like a form of diagnosis.
Right.
That the shaman is going to sing so you sing to the group and guide the whole process, but then there's the one-on-one singing. Right. Where the person has shared with you, you have something to go on. Okay, this is what, they're going on, and they're going to see in their visions and through their process of cleaning and talking to the ayahuasca and the plants and working with you shamanically to try to help understand, what is the nature of your problem, or at least what's a facet of the nature of your problem that we could approach and work on,
Because the other facets might be shown after deep in ceremony, right?
Right.
It
There's
goes deeper
multiple
than,
facets, right?
yes,
So it's, yeah,
yes,
there's different sides. So the idea is to make progress, not to
right,
necessarily understand everything of everything and, you got it all figured out.
right.
That you often doesn't help at all, you know?
Right. Well, I know you talk about how psych means the soul and delic means revealing. And that's what it
Yeah.
is. It's kind of revealing the soul. That's what and from your words, and perhaps a portal to more mystical experiences. Our mind blocks these things and we can see things that are important to us in our health. Psychedelic soul revealing. So anyway, help us understand from your perspective as a doctor and a healer who studied plant medicine with the shamans in South America, how does going through this experience, how does it provide for emotional healing?
I think that, profound emotional healing is what kind of was the theme through the cases I present in the book, right?
Yes.
That they had these different kinds of illnesses and, that they all got better with the same kind of approach, basically. And my point was that there's got to be some kind of physiology linking these problems, because if the same kind of treatment is working on all the different problems from PTSD to this chronic cough to the
Mm-hmm.
Crohn's disease to the psoriasis to the addiction. It's like, okay, so what ties these things together? And we have to kind of talk to the patient to understand what it was that they shared in their experience. And it was always I would say, like a deep emotional healing experience, working through their
Yes.
personal trauma, their family trauma, all that kind of stuff. And so how do you do that? How do you do that? And so the plant medicine, the ayahuasca definitely can be in some forms of psychedelic medicine, like let's say MDMA assisted psychotherapy, where they use a substance like that, and everything's different. I think plant spirit medicine has its own flavor, and MDMA assisted psychotherapy has its own flavor. But from the psychedelic, that kind of term, which is interesting because I was just in this conference in Costa Rica, and there was this guy Manati, very interesting Ecuadorian shaman, and he was getting a feel for like what is this psychedelic community, and that he's getting included in because he's a plant medicine shaman. And he
Right.
wasn't so sure that was such a thing he wanted to be part of, He's like, I'm not sure this is really the same thing at all. Like this psychedelic, psychonautic, the party scene and all that kind of stuff. He was just like, this is definitely not what we're doing. And I don't know if that's an appropriate term for us to be like included within, with the
Yes,
plant
using
medicine
that
traditions.
anymore. Yeah, that's
So, but I have
interesting.
it all over in the book throughout, that it
Right.
is. And what I mean is the psychedelic medicine in the sense that there is shared biochemistry, with some of these psychedelic treatments like psilocybin assisted psychotherapy for
Yes.
end of life anxiety and the kind of experiences people have, and treatment with ayahuasca ceremony, even within a traditional Shipibo healing diet. So all that being said, kind of got like carried away there. I'm about to reel it back
Oh,
in
that's
here.
okay. That's okay. Well, I was just asking from your perspective, how does, the ayahuasca
Yeah.
provide
So how does that
for
work to help you? So
emotional
then the idea is that
healing?
it helps open your mind,
Right, right.
number one, in a
Can you
way
tell
that,
about, I'm
like we
sorry,
say, with suspending judgment, that's the idea, is you're able to kind of take a look at certain things that are just, some things are shut off. We see a lot of repressed memories revealed. We
right,
see a lot of repressed areas of our mind or repressed areas of our thinking or feeling. They get opened up. So the ego, when people describe the ego dissolving, the independent structures dissolve a bit and allows for a lot of this emotional content to come forward.
right.
Sometimes it's going to come forward like the way it comes forward in dreams, kind of a little bit
Dreams, but
metaphorical and but mystical and magical at the same time. And they help kind of tell the story of some of these, what we would call, like in the traditional Shipibo style, like the energy, the
yeah,
energy behind this stuff. So then that's what the shamans are saying. These are energetic problems that these people have. And so material kind of approaches are not that effective, just knives and scalpels and
Yes.
pills and pharmaceuticals. And so you need an energetic approach. So they need a safe place to be vulnerable. I mean, that's extremely important. So the sacred space. So there's something about a spiritual context, a properly run spiritual context, not a spiritual context that's hypocritical and false and people are being abused and blah, 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 and they're lying and the
Right.
charlatanism. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about like a genuinely sacred space where it's dedicated to making people, taking care of people so that they can be safe in order to be vulnerable
Right.
and to approach the very difficult things, the very embarrassing things, the shameful things that have happened to them in their lives, or just be safe enough to explore, beyond their usual state of mind.
Right.
And so the ceremony in the spiritual context, not just ayahuasca ceremony, but, sweat lodge run properly is like that. Properly run psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is like that. Many rituals, many approaches to spiritual healing, breath work in the right setting is like
Mm-hmm.
that. It opens people up and they start getting past their mind. Their mind starts, getting overwhelmed by their feeling. And all of a sudden, there's a catharsis, there's a release, there's an emotional breakthrough that can happen, or there's an opportunity to re-examine something, to reconcile something, to work through something, to resolve something, and then to let something go, and that's that you allow the energy to move again, whatever the energy was that got stuck in there, that's holding you up, to free that up and let things flow again within you. And so
Mm-hmm.
what that does is it's interesting because I bring it up all the time that there's a link, it seems to me, between the emotional being and the energy, the mystical, what people talk, and what we feel, what it is to be alive. And I talk about a lot, within the medical, whatever, the biomedical model, we have to be able to talk about how we feel and what it feels like to be alive. Otherwise, it's just really silly. It's really kind of it's just half, it's
Right.
not, you wouldn't talk to somebody you really respected or loved that way,
Right. Right.
denying what it really is for them to be alive in the present moment.
I know
And
you
so,
mentioned in your book about how kind of sad it is that in medical school you never hear anybody talking about love or talking about feelings,
yeah,
and
yeah,
obviously something is not working in the materialistic model, because a lot of people, with all the anxiety and depression and PTSD, and so many are not being helped. And this is such a not even, I don't want to use the word promising because they've been doing it for thousands of years, but I guess now what we're
no,
seeing
but
in Western
yeah,
civilization, yes, to help those sorts of
yeah,
things.
relevant, currently
Yes,
relevant, you
relevant,
know,
currently relevant.
currently relevant. And so that was Manati, the Ecuadorian shaman who was with Costa Rica with us, he had a lot of very interesting things to say. And it was just, his big comment was that, the spiritual realm exists, in other words, at the very least, our subjective existence, what we feel, the mystical, mysterious parts of what it is to be alive, it's there,
Yes.
whether we admit it or talk about it or not. And then there's the material, and they're related and they're in continuum with each other. But if you just focus on one and not the other, you're going to miss out on a lot. And so we see this thing where we just focus on the material side so intensely and for a long time in the healthcare system, and then we see what gets overlooked in that. And you
Right.
see this epidemic of these certain maladies that you describe, that anxiety and depression are actually getting worse, they're actually more
Mm-hmm.
common, despite all the research, all the money poured into that, all the new drugs that have come up around that. Addiction treatment is very frustrating. It's just like a money pit. They're just pouring money in there and coming up with their theories, and everybody has so much to say about it. And then you have PTSD, you got people
Yeah.
from Vietnam, veterans for decades. And then you got these kids showing up to, like I bring it up in my book or say it at other places. My friend Russ, who was the Vietnam vet, case person
Right.
that
I
we
wanted
present
you
in
to
the
tell
book.
us.
Yeah, he talks about
Yes.
how he goes to the group therapy, and the young guys coming back from Iraq are looking across the room at him and saying, am I going to be here for the rest of my life?
Oh,
You know?
right. You said how one can initiate forgiveness in the brain, but however, it doesn't really heal until you forgive in your heart. You can forgive yourself with
Yeah,
the intention in your brain, but it really doesn't happen until it's in your heart. And that's
right.
what something like ayahuasca helps you do.
Right. So that's
Yeah,
the energetic experience, the felt experience, you know. And so we all have experiences like that in our lives
right.
where we know what it was that made the difference, you know, of
Yeah,
how we feel about something, either something traumatic that happened to us or something inspirational that happened to us, and how much we feel in those times and how significant our feelings are in helping us understand like what is significant to us in our lives.
yes. I think this is a great time to wrap this conversation up, and we will be continuing it next week. So, Joe, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation, and I really look forward to continuing. So, have a great day, and we will talk very soon. If any of you would like to learn more about Joe, you can find him on his website at Dr. Joe Tafur, TAFUR.com, and also on the website modernspirit.org.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you want to learn more about the show, you can find us at interviewswithinnocence.com and on Facebook or Instagram at Interviews with Innocence. Please write me a message, tell me what you liked, and let me know what else you would like to hear. I would love to hear from you. And if you liked what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating and review. It helps other listeners find the show. Thank you.